Hello, everyone, and welcome to a ReRaise follow-up interview. Today, I have a very special guest. You may have known his stream if you watched the ReRaise stream. This is Daniel Gulyas. Perhaps you know him as Ghoul02. He is the one who brought us the ReRaise stream from Dallas, Texas. Daniel, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited to get to chat and talk about some trading card games.
Absolutely. So let me set the stage a little bit. For those of you who don't know, so Daniel not only ran the stream entirely for the Texas ReRaise event at the local game store, he also played in the event at the same time. So I'm sure he was very busy and very distracted. I couldn't imagine keeping both of those together at once. Daniel and I have been talking for a while. We play tested a lot together leading up to that, so I was super familiar with his deck and all the things he could do. He did make the top cut, so he was in what ended up being the top 8, not top 16 at that event. So yeah, he's gonna tell me a little bit about it, his journey, things of that nature. So let's start with, how long have you been playing FF?
So I got into Final Fantasy around the middle of 2020, I want to say. So around 2019, I got back into TCGs by playing Yu-Gi-Oh! If anybody ever has watched it, there's a really, really great Yu-Gi-Oh! Series called Sealed Only Yu-Gi-Oh! Where this guy on YouTube, his name is Nim, would go out, he spent $30 a week on sealed packs and would play Yu-Gi-Oh! And at the time, I had the conception that card games cost exorbitant amounts of money, and here's this guy that spent $30 a week on opening booster packs, not even buying singles, and was playing Yu-Gi-Oh! At a high level. I'm like, that looks fun. I should do that. So I went there, did that, and then I was browsing on TCG Player one day. I'm like, oh, there's a Final Fantasy tab. Like, there's a Final Fantasy TCG. Let's see what it looks like. Then I saw, I've actually got the giant card for it right here. I saw this Beatrix and went, oh, I've got to play this game. So I got a good buddy of mine into the game. We both downloaded decks and played Octagon and played horribly and had no idea what we were doing. We basically played it as though it was Yu-Gi-Oh! Or like we knew how discarding cards work, but didn't really understand that the stack and like the differences between the stack and the way chains work in Yu-Gi-Oh! Are because like in Yu-Gi-Oh! The equivalent of the stack is chains, and when a chain resolves, it goes from the beginning all the way to the end. You can't like re-interrupt it or change it or do anything like that. So we assumed once you said, okay, no responses, everything went through, which makes a big, big difference in how you can play and what the differences are. But so my first deck was Water Lightning Knights in Opus 13. And then from there, I read an article on, I want to say FFTCG Crystarium about Storm.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that at the time it was Icewind Storm.
Yeah.
And I was like, ooh, this looks really interesting. This is really fun. I get to kind of... My favorite thing about the deck in that regard is that in Yu-Gi-Oh! I would play both kind of control-y and mid-rangey decks a lot of the time. And the cool thing about Final Fantasy is that your combo decks, which is every deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a combo deck. Like, that's just kind of how the game plays.
Yeah.
But your combo decks in Final Fantasy also have to play as control decks. And I think it's a really fascinating element of the game that not only am I trying to build up enough resources to go off and do all the stuff I want to do, I have to control the game state long enough to survive to get to that point. And that was a really appealing aspect of decks like that. So, fast forward, I kept playing, dabbling a bit here and there, playing as people, slowly getting better at the game. I still had not bought a single card at this point. I only played on Octagon. And then R4 happened, and I looked, and second place was Okimoto on Earthwind Storm in a meta where Stern was legal. Sophie's at 3. We have Sophie Doga running around, and here's this Earthwind Storm deck coming from out of nowhere and making it to second place. And I'm like, okay, it's time for me to buy some cardboard. I got to play this deck in person a bit. And that's how I got an Earthwind Storm. And that's pretty much been the deck that I've spent the most time on since then.
And that's what you ended up taking to ReRaise too, was
basically
Earthwind. Only non-thing is Lock, which is partially ice, but also wind, so
he's an honorary Earthwind card.
Yeah, exactly,
yeah,
right?
Sure.
He's your big payoff for it. That's awesome. So do you like Final Fantasy IX? Is that why? Do you know the character Beatrix? Or did you just
yes.
Like the art?
I mean, I've played basically every Final Fantasy. I played only like a couple hours of 15. I meant to get deeper into it, just haven't. But like,
which is appropriate because Nyx is our banner.
Yeah. That's more related to Kingsglaive and the fact that Axis is the best card in Lightning, but
So I've been told.
no, it's the 9's my favorite Final Fantasy, which obviously was the reason to get into the game. But like, I mean, like you have to love stuff like 6. 8 was the game that got me into the series, so I've always got like a soft spot for especially Squall and Renoa. Like Waltz for the Moon is still one of my favorite video game cutscenes of all time.
I love that one.
You know, like the characters are just so memorable, and the card designers actually do a decent job of like taking account like lore and stuff like that in the cards. Like I think like a really great example, Emmett Selk is the most flavorful card I've ever seen in a TCG, where it's like you choose him, you know, you're gonna get rid of him. Nope, I'm gone. See ya.
Yeah.
Peace out. I'm gonna come back, by the way, and still, you know, like it's so cool. And I know that you know people hate Kadaj, but like very similar. Like you can almost like I haven't even seen
Advent Children.
Yeah, Advent Children at all, so I don't know who the character is at all, but I can already kind of guess based on the card. Oh, he's going to be there, do something, you know, kind of evil, and then he's going to disappear for a while and come back later. Like, it's such a cool thing that when they can actually get, you know, the Opus 16 Titus with the flip kick, like he's doing a sports move. You know, you can't block him, and then you finally get in. Oh, here's my thing. I'm gonna do my big fancy trick, and I'm gonna go, you know, flip turn back into the deck. Like it's such a cool thing when you know lore and a really interesting, well-developed game come together. It's really, really special.
It's different too from something like Magic, which has all original cards, and like Yu-Gi-Oh has stuff, you know, from the anime and the manga. But, you know, Final Fantasy obviously has these games you can base it on. So, yeah, I have always thought they do a pretty good job lore-wise. All right, so let's talk about ReRaise. So this was this past weekend, and it was at the local game store. I believe there was about 59 people there, somewhere around that much.
Yeah, 59 entrants, I believe, was our final count for Swiss.
And you ended up taking your Earthwind Storm. At any point, did you consider taking any other deck, or were you always like, nope, this is a ride or die, this is what I'm going for?
If Opus 16 hadn't happened, I might have considered playing either like Twins or like a Iridia Turbo list. But so Earthwind Storm, I thought was in a very weird place in Opus 15. Essentially, until the Guardian structure deck was printed, I thought it was kind of becoming bloated. There was a lot of stuff that you needed to get into the deck, but you didn't really have room for. So you're running a lot of like weird one-ofs and you know things to try to like you know. Basically meld the meta to fit you. And a lot of the new power cards that were printed in, especially the big differences were Atomos, Lulu, and Mira, just solved all of the deck's problems in one shot, basically. It felt like. So now, like the list I you know that I have, I think is incredibly clean and clear cut. I'm running multiple copies of almost every card in the deck, except for a couple of you know spicy one of techs. I've got a deck profile on my channel as well. People want to check that out, but like it's so strong and so consistent, especially when you factor in probably my single favorite card in the game at this point in Fiona, being able to literally say, I need exactly one combo piece and I can win the game right here, and I'm going to go get that combo piece right now. So you combine all of that in this one really powerful engine, and it's fantastic.
Yeah. So it sounds like you were pretty locked in on it. You and I tested a lot with that deck back and forth, and, you know, aggro gave it some trouble, but aggro's usually gives any kind of, like, later game control deck trouble, so that's not really, like, unique to that one. And, yeah, you definitely had all the solitaire turns where I was like, well, I'm going to, like, surf on the internet while you're sitting there chaining stuff for 10 minutes straight, which is interesting, too, because that'll come up later when we talk about Top Cut, because maybe that bit you in the butt a little bit. But so kind of walk me through your day. You ended up, there were 6 rounds, right? Yeah, there wasn't 7 rounds, so there were 6. And you ended up 5-1, I believe?
Yeah, so I wake up early in the morning. I got like 3 hours of sleep. I go get breakfast, you know, all that good stuff. I show up to the venue at like 8 a.m. The tournament doesn't start till 10, but I've got to get there early enough to get a tech check going for the stream. I've got to get internet set up. I found out at the event that you can't naturally capture audio on a MacBook through OBS. You have to get external third-party software to do that.
Oh.
Didn't know that, so I'm there and I'm like frantically trying to Google how to get the audio working on OBS so that you all could hear Travis's voice on the stream. So I got that working, and then I had to get the tech check set up. I got to get I had to write up my deck list because I hadn't done that yet because I was doing other things. So I write up my deck list, turn it in. I'm going through all this stuff. Things seem to be going mostly fine. Frame wasn't dropping any frames, which became an issue later. If anybody here watched the stream, you guys all know that kind of fell apart later. But so, go through all that stuff, and then finally we get to round 1, and all the pairings go up, and I say, okay, I'm gonna go. I had kind of a mental thing. I wanted to get one of my friends on stream because I think that he's got one of the coolest deck lists that no one else really even knows is a thing. So I put him on stream, and then I go double check, and I go check and see who I'm playing against. I see Daniel G dash Matthew O, and I go, that might be the single worst person I can play in round 1 of a major event, because he could take one look at my deck and know exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah. So how did that match up? I know that was the one round you lost. Again, I didn't get to see it. Do you feel like there was anything you could have done? Was it bad draws? Do you think you just can't beat that soiree
It was
matchup?
100% bad draws.
Okay.
Soiree, especially EX Soiree, I feel is actually a matchup I'm favored in. EX Burst, I'm not going to do damage until it is profitable for me to do so, because there's no need for me to. And that means the EX Bursts don't matter that much to me. By the time I'm actually attacking and going for lethal, I'm going to have a board of 9 forwards.
Mm-hmm.
Name an EX Burst that'll get you, 9 forwards off the field. They don't exist.
Yeah.
And I find that those EX Bursts tend to clog the deck enough where they slow down where I can catch up with them.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I open my first hand, I look, I see Tyro as my only backup. I go, nope, that goes to the bottom. Next hand, no backups.
Oof.
So I'm like, okay. I've done this before. This happens. Discard, Zidane. Let's see the hand. I'm going to make him brick just as badly as I did. I look, I see, okay, I remember there was a Tyro. I'm pretty sure there was a King Thornton, and there was a Shinju. And I'm like, cool. I rip the Shinju. I'm okay. This will work. So, okay, your turn. Draw, discard, Edel.
Yeah, I was just
Shinju.
anticipating. It's like, it's Matt, so of course he's just going to top deck the Edel and go for it.
And and at that point, I'm so far in the hole. I'm down 3 cards. I have no backups. My deck has to get to 3 or 4 backups before it function. I've got this Zidane that, sure, I'm going to get 2 points of quick damage. Actually, I'm not even going to get a point of quick damage
because
there's Edel on the field. So the normal thing you do when you go for a Zidane starts, like, okay, I'm going to sacrifice a little bit, but I'm my lethal push is going to have to be a lot smaller later. I just had nothing, so I do a little bit. I get a Shantoto off eventually, but at that point it's just too late. Especially because I had a Shantoto in hand, and then Irwin comes down, rips the Shantoto, so I have to now Fiona for a Shantoto, so I have no board and 3 backups.
Yeah.
And just it's hard to recover at that point when you open that poorly.
So you were running the 3-cost Zidane, which I still think is one of the best cards in the game, but people have really, really been playing the new 2-cost one. Did you consider that one at any point? Because you cast a lot of cards in your deck, so you technically would have the CP for the spare cards. You'd get the haste. Did it ever tempt you, or were you always on the 3-cost one?
So I've playtested both, and what I've noticed in Zidane in particular is that 3-cost is always good. He does exactly what he says on the tin. He fixes some bad matchups by saying, if I'm against something like a Sky Pirates that I think I'm going to struggle with, they search the Vaughn, cool. Zidane, rip the Vaughn, you got to find another one somehow. And I can do that. It's very consistent. It always does exactly what it says. The 2-cost Zidane is very high roll, but it's also very weirdly aggressive. There's a lot of times where for that card to get value, you don't just have to play it after casting 3 cards. You have to swing it into a clear board at 3 cards. That happens so rarely, and it baited me into a ton of bad decisions. So the annoying thing about that card is that card against my deck is one of the best cards in the game. But I find that it's really good against my deck and really bad in my deck.
Yeah, that's fair. It's a weird card. There are times I'm like, I just absolutely think it's busted and it's stupid. And granted, it's kind of design I don't like in general. But then, in I think it was the semifinals, Sam Toole's Fire Wind was up there going against Matt's Soiree list, and he stole so many good cards, and he still ended up losing. And so I even said on stream, I was like, so how valuable is that even? Yeah, he got him close to decking out, but he didn't deck him out. So I was like, so did that really accomplish much? He stole all this good tech, and it still didn't even matter. So I don't know. I don't know what kind of value you actually put on a card like that.
If you look at Sam's list compared to what I'm playing, Sam's list is this very aggressive Fire Wind combo deck. It doesn't really even have the control element as much outside of maybe like a Vraska. And in a deck like that, the ability for that Zidane to both find new cards to help kind of refuel a hand that you're intentionally kind of pitching to get these quick combos online, and also ignore the hand size limit is actually the thing that's really kind of toxic about it. He basically had a 8-card hand at one point. He couldn't discard 5 of them for CP. But like those options are still powerful in that regard. But I just always found that like it was good when it high rolled, and especially if I ever hit like a mirror match, it was like I just it literally drew me a card off my opponent's deck, or basically, which if it's a mirror, it's my own deck at that point. But there were so many times I'd be against Soiree, and it's like, cool, I've got a Amber. I have no search targets for this Amber, and my backup lineup is very static actually. One of my matches on stream, we can talk about it later, I bricked on having the wrong backups in my thing and couldn't play the game because of it. So like even stealing backups with that Zidane feels horrible. So I have to steal either summons that feel good to cast at instant speed, but I'm also emptying a lot of my hand and backups when I go for these big combos. I don't have the ability to cast those summons quickly to really make profit out of them. Or I've got to steal a forward that isn't archetypal, that does something good for me, and those circumstances just didn't line up often enough with having this 5k forward that now has to swing safely to do his thing.
Sure.
So I ended up eventually swapping and saying the 3 CP Zidane's going to keep me alive longer, and I pray to God that I don't see the 2 CP dropped against me at the wrong time when I can't deal with it.
Yeah. Well, obviously you turned it around after that, going 5-0 for the next 5 matches. Do you remember all those, or any of them that come to mind you want to mention? Or
so I had the bye next round, which actually was like the best possible thing for tiebreakers, because one of your tiebreakers is opponent's record. If I don't play anybody in round 2, I'm not playing somebody that's immediately 0-2.
Yeah.
So it sucks because I want to play the game. Like I'm not there at the event to not play. I've got all these really fantastic people from out of town. I'm really talkative when I play. I love talking to people. And saying, oh, this is what you're doing, or that's what your deck is. But it sucks when you pay money for an event and you just don't get to play the game. Next round after that was against Fire Ice Knights aggro, which is actually a really scary matchup because again, that's the exact thing that I don't want to see, is something that attacks my backups, attacks my hands, it kills me before I get set up.
Are you saying you don't like Glasswell?
I was going to say, one of your favorite cards in the set is actually one of the worst cards in the game for my deck to see, because people that don't know, Laswell is a 2-drop Knight. So again, I'm the Knights guy. I should love this card. And it's a really cool card. But it is so toxic as a going second card. Because you can go, your opponent, the most common play that you'll see someone do is someone will go pitch, play a 4 CP backup that searches a backup. And if you search an odd costed backup, especially a 3-drop, like say, I don't know, Althea or Tilica, and your opponent goes, oh, I really like that search. Pitch Ice, play Laswell. Now, this backup that you did on your first turn gave you no value because you can't use it for your next turn, doesn't advance your game state for your next turn. You're still on a 4-card hand. You have a backup as one of those 4 cards that you can't play profitably because you have to discard to play it. And also, they have a forward that's going to swing in and make you discard next turn if you don't get a body down. So, and that doesn't even fix the problem, because if their next card is, if you say, oh, just plop down anything, a 5k body, chump block it, right?
Yeah.
They go, okay, cool. You got you're slowing your game plan down by setting your backups. Pitch Charlotte, freeze your forward, swing Laswell. Oh, by the way, discard for the Laswell effect at the end of the turn. It's such a ridiculous card to play against in that regard, and it's honestly really frustrating at times if your deck isn't specifically fire with removal to kill the stupid little guy before he does anything. Not calling him overpowered or unfair or anything like that. The game is the game, but it is really that is. The fastest way for me to lose is see my opponent go Laswell, and then it completely shifts how I have to play the game at that point.
Yeah. Well, and that's when he's at his absolute strongest, right? Is literally the first turn of the game going second, where you can just freeze that backup they put down, and then if you see him a little later, he actually loses a little bit of steam, but that immediate punish when you're trying to set up is definitely huge. But it sounds like, did he just open poorly? Did he Laswell you? Did you...
It was a bit of a weird game. I'm pretty sure Laswell came down at some point, but it wasn't the first play. and then I don't remember how I ended up stabilizing. Probably a Shantoto at some point, and I do remember how I won, which was he Shantoto effects, dulls my field, doesn't have lethal access, swings in, realizes he can't empty my hand because he had a 1 CP lightning on the field.
Oh, okay.
So but he couldn't empty my hand because I had 2 cards in hand. So he goes, okay, I'm going to leave this lightning up as a blocker, and we'll go from there. So then I go to my turn. I managed to get. I'm like, okay, I've got enough attackers. I can get him to damage 6, but I can't kill with the forwards I have on field. And I look at my hand and I see Titan. I'm like, ooh. So I go swing, get him to damage 6, then just drop the Titan, wipe my whole board, wipe his board, and then do the last point of damage that way, which doesn't happen often. But
Yeah,
it's like
it doesn't come up very much, but very nice.
Yeah, I'll sometimes do it even if I know I don't have to do it, just because it's a really funny way to win sometimes.
Yeah.
It's like, I could swing in and do the traditional, I'm going to punch you for it, but I'm also just going to drop and, everyone's going to fall off. And
Yeah,
no
Titan
one's
just
gonna be able to resurrect
landslides,
until the end of
and
the
they all...
fight. Yeah. Just table flip it for the win. Yeah.
Right.
So again, scary matchup. I win that 1-7-6. My next match was against someone that was... I don't know if it was technically Waltz's. I think they might have also just been a Black Mage fan, because I saw a lot of Black Mages that I hadn't seen before in the deck. So we'll call it Fire Lightning Waltz's, but it also could have been just Black Mage Tribal.
Yeah.
And I go first. I play Nordstalin. I pass. They go pitch, Waltz 2. And I'm licking my lips. I'm like, okay, this is actually like a really good, because I'm like, okay, I'm not committing any forwards. You can swing in, 3 turns in a row. I don't care. So they just never drew backups over the course of the game, and I felt really bad because sometimes my deck can struggle to get those points of damage in. Like the game is over, but it's going to take me 2 more turns to get the kill.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've noticed with the turbo discard, you'll get to the same point too, where sometimes they just won't draw backups early, and they'll have no hand and no way to use their backups.
Yeah.
So I eventually got to the point where he was on 2 backups that were frozen, and then I discarded his whole hand with Lock and Zidane. And it's like, what are you going to do at that point? But I couldn't kill on the next turn, so not only do they have these 2 frozen backups and 2 cards they can't play in hand, I have to rip them the next turn just in case, even though I can't kill. I'm like, this is bullying at this point. I'm sorry. I just, I want to end the game. So I do that. I don't like doing that to people. I'm always very careful when I play Earthwind Storm. If I play new people in Octagon, I'll play something else. I won't play it just because I know that it can be very frustrating for people to sit there.
Yeah.
It's like, I survived my game plan, so now I get to do whatever I want. Whatever you wanted to do, I survived, so now I get to play for, And again, these combo lines are very intricate, very difficult, and I have to, see them and make them on the spot because what cards I've seen earlier in the game I have to pitch for CP, what cards are left in my deck. All that is still very different. It's very non-linear in that way. That doesn't mean it's necessarily the most exciting thing for especially a new player to sit in front of and go, why would I play this game when my opponent's going to do this to me? So I'll play other stuff when I'm playing against new players. I'll mess around with Guardians. I love playing Knights, particularly ones that are less about like turboing down a Garland, and then because Garland can also be very similar in that regard too. But so, anyways, I do that, and then after that, I believe we had our lunch break.
Yeah, the longest lunch break in a history. He puts up the notice that says return at 2:30. And, I'm casting at home, so I'm going out, I'm making something. But, I got to keep an close eye, because one, if he needs to tell me something, too, okay, I need to get back to casting. And so I come back at 2:30. I was, laying down, closing my eye. All right, time to get up. And I come down, and they're, doing raffle prizes. And that went on for almost an hour. And that's not an exaggeration. It was nearly
No, we
an hour.
literally had, 100 raffle prizes that were pulled over the course of that. And for better or worse, when you pull 100 raffle tickets and people have to walk up to the front...
Yeah.
It takes a while, and again, people are all excited and having fun with it. They're not necessarily thinking about the stream, which they shouldn't. It's about having fun as a group and as an event. And it's objectively a lot of fun. But part of me is like, man, if we could just stop clapping, so we could just rapid fire these names, it would go a little faster.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, people are having fun. I'm not going to fault people for for that. I got a really sick deck box out of the gig too, so
nice.
I can't complain too much about that. And there's good about that as well. Again, it sucked for people that were on stream because I only can give the info that I have access to. And what I was told was lunch until 2 or 2:30, be back by then. I didn't know that the next thing was going to be hour of pulling raffles. They said that they were going to cut off stuff with the raffles at to 2:30. So, or not at that, like after round 4. I didn't know that meant before the next round we're gonna poll for an hour, and people are going to walk up to the front, claim the prizes and stuff.
Well,
Otherwise, I would have said something.
Well, and yeah, I from the home experience, and again, me, maybe another viewer can, I'll just walk away, come back whenever. But I was like, well, I don't want to like go start anything because again, I need to start talking whenever it kicks in. I didn't know how long that was going to be. So, but after that was round 5. Who'd you face for that one?
I played a good friend of mine who also was so another local player who was on Mono Water. And that matchup is, or Mono Water, I call it Folka, which will make someone like Snugsy a little bit mad, but that is one of the easiest matchups for my deck. I think it's almost unlosable in playtesting. So essentially, if you've never played against Folka, what the deck does is, I call it a burn deck. It to me fits all of the criteria for burn decks that I played in other TCGs, where your goal is to get out something that does a point of damage does damage for free every turn, which is Titus. And Titus, essentially, the bottom part of that text could be replaced with "you cannot choose Titus," and the deck would do the exact same thing. I mean, technically, it's a little bit fair because if you're about to die, you can choose the Titus. No one ever is going to choose the damn Titus. So what it does is it says, "I'm going to put this Titus. You're going to die in 7 turns, and everything you play will go back to your hand, and I can do that faster than you can kill me."
Yeah.
And if you're telling my deck that I have 7 turns to do anything I want to, I'm going to do anything I want to. And also, my deck has a lot of non-targeting removal, so Shantotos and Titans are the bane of Folka's existence, as it turns out.
Speaking of that deck, it was quite popular at the last Florida event, but I didn't see it on stream once. I never really heard much about it. Did you see many people playing it, or did folks kind of give up on it, or...?
Well, it took over my locals.
Okay.
My locals are maybe 10 to 12 players on average when people show up, which is all at the same shop that we were playing ReRaise at. So, and about 25% of our players are on that deck. I think it just didn't convert very well, I'll be honest. Because I know that everyone that I know that plays that at our locals was playing it there. And a fair number of people in the room were playing the deck. It just didn't convert.
Yeah.
Maybe because... I've got my theories on why that might be. I think the deck is a little bit immutable. It does kind of the one thing and can't really change its game plan if it hits a bad matchup. It's just like, cool, anyway, I'm going to play the Titus and I'm going to swing in. It's like, because the thing about Titus as a card is if you just play it and you don't attack with it, it's useless. It's a 7 CP vanilla, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they have to swing it every turn, but that means that like he's not blocking, he's not advancing the game state defensively at all for them. So your defensive stuff has to come from either the Folkas or the Lightnings or whatever, or the summons. But those only get you so far sometimes until you draw the Moschery, which is why the deck is even on 3 Moschery, which, let me tell you, if you're on 3 of a light card and that light card doesn't break itself for an effect, there's something that's a little interesting about that card. But, yeah, it's... I just think that the deck can't change its game plan enough to really match when decks start knowing what it's doing and playing against it.
Sure. What'd you do in round 6?
Oh, the saddest round.
Was this against Nicholas?
This was against Nick. So this is against my friend that I wanted to put on stream because I thought they have one of the coolest decks. So what they play is this Ice Lightning list that uses, it's got the Alcid Zeramis, it's got the Laswells, it's got, the Charlottes, and, it's got a copy of like Sid Randell and the Gentiana. What it also has is the Lightning Half, which is a very slim Kingslave package. And you might think, oh, yeah, Kingslave. I know what Kingslave does. No, you do not. Because what people don't know is, or don't realize, is that Kingslave are forwards that summon themselves to the break zone for an effect. There's a little dark card in the game called Nox Suzaku that wants to see a forward go to the break zone. So the way that the deck plays is we call it Nightsworn. So if anybody's played Yu-Gi-Oh, there's an archetype in Yu-Gi-Oh called Lightsworn, where you send the top of your cards of your deck to the graveyard just for effect at the end of a turn. So what you can do is you kind of turbo through your deck with these. You get to your copies of Nox Suzaku, you slam the Nox Suzaku, and you just can rush down your opponent before they ever have a chance to catch up. He calls it like a tempo deck. It's pretty much halfway between tempo and aggro. But it's really, really cool, outside of the fact that it'll kill you in 3 turns.
If you go back and watch the stream, it was the first one featured. Nick was on the right side. I think he went against Ryan Chen, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he was against a Fusoya list, and he even said, we were talking about him afterwards, because he lost round 1. He did the same thing as me. He lost round 1 and then won out, and it was winning in, losing out for top cut for both of us. And he was laughing because he's like, he kept reviewing that game and thinking, like, should I have done this instead? And I'm like, honestly, Nick, he went 8 CP Hecaton Kyre into Shantoto the next turn. Like, you can't expect that. Like, if he has his out, he's got his outs. He's like, yeah, I know, but like, there's ways I could have played better. And I'm like, probably true, but second guessing that's always like tough. But so we play our match, and I've played him probably 30 to 50 times on the, my exact list versus his exact list.
Yeah.
And I swear we have gone 10 games in a row, I win. 10 games in a row, he wins. 10 games in a row, I win. Like, it's been like that streaky on who wins these games. And what ended up happening is he's got a single copy of 3 CP Rama as a tech card. And the tech is for my deck and for Folka. Because 3 CP, break a monster. It's Homos or Tross. 7k to a forward. Let's kill the Rosa or the Folka.
Yeah.
So he holds on to this, like, okay, Ghoul's going to do this eventually, and it's going to be great. And I did not open a Tomos. So I do he didn't see a Laswell until halfway through. Laswell's like the silver bullet card for my matchup. So I got to do everything I wanted to do, and I didn't have any problem. And he had to play pretty slow because he knew I bluffed a Shantoto that I had. Like, he knew pretty much I had a Shantoto at all times. So, he goes turn 1, I'll Sid into... I want to say it was a Tread.
That's a little underwhelming.
It seems underwhelming, but then you realize that now Al Cid doesn't lose to Titan anymore. So the only thing that beats it is a Shantoto. And then also that Tread can break itself if he gets the Nox Suzaku. He can potentially do stuff like, if he sees a Shulk in hand, he can go, okay, crack Tread, play Nox Suzaku. If he hits any way to get a Shulk, he has protection from Shantoto, and he wins the game on the spot.
Yeah.
So it seems very underwhelming, like, oh my gosh. But like, when that's your turn 1 into Nordstalin, that's 2 points of damage coming in for the next 3 turns.
Sure.
There's a lot of haste in that deck. If I do anything wrong, I'm going to lose. So, it was fun. I felt, kind of bad. I'm like, he's holding this very specific tech card that he knows is good against my deck, and I didn't draw that side of my deck.
Yeah.
Until it was too late. At one point, he swings in. He swings in on one turn. It's Rosa into damage. I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna have to search a Rosa next. Goes to the next turn, swing, Tyro into damage. I pick up my deck. I go, okay, I've got to get the Rosa here so it doesn't lose. Top card of the deck was the 3rd Rosa.
Wow.
I'm like, oh my god,
so
that
you
EX
almost lost it.
I almost lost all my Rosas, and the deck can win without Rosa, actually.
Sure, but it helps.
Oh no, it makes things much nicer when I don't have to figure out a way to do all my things without Rosa.
Tyro coming in clutch.
Yeah, that EX burst sometimes. It's one of, I think, only 5 or 6 EX bursts in the deck, which is like one of the things that scared me about the list going into the event. Is the last 2 changes I made to the list cut 2 EX bursts from it. There used to be a Citra and there used to be a Star Sybil. I found that the Citra kept bricking me early, and the Star Sybil I never wanted to cast. I just wanted it to go to damage to search a Shantoto against aggressive decks. So it's like, at that point, I'm gonna bite the bullet. I'm gonna Fiona for it instead.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, hey, that got you into top cut. That put you in. Were you 4th place or 5th place? I know you.
I was 5th after Swiss.
Okay, so you took on the 4th place person, which would have been Shine L, and this was in our top cut. And he had I was really happy to see his deck up there. He was playing Earth Ice, and I kind of thought maybe the days of that making a top cut were gone. Made a top 8 no less. So I remember when this came on the stream, part of me was very heavily rooting for you because you're my friend and we tested so much and all that. But part of me was like, well, I won't be mad if this makes it either, because again, it's just a cool list, and I'd like to see it. And so we definitely have a lot to say about this one, especially with the way it ended. And do you want to walk through it at all? Do you want to just kind of talk about what happened at the end?
Well, first, I'm going to say
I mean, if it was on stream, of course, people can see it if they want to, but...
Yeah, well, the first thing about it is all the decks in Top Cut were pretty cool and interesting for the most part. We had, in the top 8, there were 7 different archetypes or decks represented, which I think is fantastic. And I think a lot of that is due to some interesting meta shifts recently. A lot of decks now are starting to... The meta was so fast and aggressive that people are like, okay, cool. Here's 30 EX burst. Kill me through this.
Yeah.
Which slows the game down by a lot, actually, because now those aggressive decks are starting to realize if I go super aggressive, I'm going to lose with that. But also, a lot of the EX bursts, you don't ever want to actually cast them.
Mm-hmm.
So you end up with a lot of dead cards in hand, which slow the game down, which prevent you from killing your opponent quickly. So a lot of decks in Top Cut were actually a lot slower than I think where they were for previous events because of all these interesting meta shifts. I think that Ice Earth is a really big beneficiary of that, and it's part of the reason it ended up getting as high as it did. The other reason I think the Ice Earth did so well is Scale Toad. And I know that you mentioned, like, oh, Scale Toad with Bismarck, they'll discard down, they'll be in 1 card, but you'll still bounce and you'll still draw 2 and you'll be on 3 cards. But I think that what people don't understand right now, monsters are so powerful.
Yeah.
I was looking through, and for instance, we were talking about Folka earlier. Water has no outs to a Scale Toad.
Yeah, that's true.
There's nothing it can do to it. I was looking... Ice cannot kill a monster. There is no card in Ice other than Lock that kills a monster. Lock is not an Ice card.
Here's my shocked face.
Yeah, so... And it's funny because I remember when Starred came out, there was a big joke. Break a monster? Who wants to do that? Why would that be an option? And it was, for a while, it seemed like if they just needed an extra mode of text on a card, they were slapping choose a monster and break it. They honestly need more monster hate right now because monsters are so prevalent and so common in the meta. I genuinely think if you do not have a card in your deck that breaks a monster, you will struggle to win at the top level right now. But that's why that list got there. I think is genuinely the power of Scale Toad against a lot of these slower decks. All these decks now want to have all these dead cards in hand for these EX bursts, and they're trying to curve their backups out. That Scale Toad, it's 3 CP. It's going to eat probably 6 or 8 CP over the course of the game minimum.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't do that, it's going to get their hand size low, at which point Physalis starts having a lot of fun. Physalis paired with that 2 CP Sophie. Oh, man. So that's why that deck, I think, did really well at the event, and I wouldn't be shocked to see it start to continue to do well until people start realizing, I've got to find a way to kill a monster. I don't care what it is, I've got to kill a monster.
It's a fair assessment. So, obviously, game 1, you ended up taking... You got to your Storm Windy point, and there's just not really much any deck's going to be able to do about you at that point. So, you went off, you did your Storm Wind things.
Yeah, we're both pretty glacial decks. I opened Nordstalin plus a couple other cards. Nordstalin, find Fiona, I get my Tilica down. They had an early Scale Toad, but they also, their tech card to kill monsters was a 2 CP Wind Summon.
Yeah.
So they played the Scale Toad. I think the very next turn, I go, Kryl, use your Shemhazai, break the Scale Toad, which ended up being fantastic for me. And at that point, they were so far behind because they spent so much CP on the Scale Toad. Yeah. I was curved out. I was always winning that game. So then we get to game 2. And the one thing about that game, both of our decks are very slow. I'm trying to get them to stop having things to do. They're trying to, get to the point where I've got a small hand size where they can pop off. Game 1, we have, I think, 75 minutes in time. Game 1 took 40 minutes.
Ooh, okay, yeah. We didn't have the time on the stream, so I could only really guess. I had no clue.
So I'm like, oh. And this put me in a bit of an awkward spot. It's kind of the one thing I don't like about playing control-style decks in TCGs, actually, is time rules do not favor slow decks.
Yeah.
Ever. This is true in Pokemon, it's true in Yu-Gi-Oh!, it's true in Final Fantasy here. So what ends up happening is the judge says, "Oh, what?" He was like, "You guys are just starting game 2 now." I'm like, "Yeah, we're just starting game 2 now." He's like, so he looks up real quick. He's like, "What happens if game 2 doesn't finish?"
Yeah.
Person who wins game 1, what takes it at that point apparently. So I'm in this awkward spot where I'm like, if he takes forever to kill me, I walk with this guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
But if he doesn't do that and I'm going to lose the game, I should scoop very quickly, go to game 3 where I get myself the best chance to win.
Yeah. I
ended up getting stuck in between, which is what ended up happening.
Yeah, you had a lot of turns on there, and again, we couldn't really see your hand, but you took, I think, about 5 what they call naps or no action passes, where you just drew cards and you pass. And I was just like, can he do nothing? Like, what is going on in his hand? Like, tell me what was going on those turns, if you remember.
So first things first, I did not open Nordstallen.
Yeah.
And the difference in games when I open Nordstallen versus when I don't open Nordstallen is crazy. Every game I opened Nordstallen, I won. Except for the last one, which I don't count as a game. That was not a game of Final Fantasy TCG. So I look at my opening hand and I see Lael Tilica, and I'm like, that's 2 backups. 2 backups is enough to, especially even cost, odd cost.
Yeah.
I can't really pass that up at that point. The chances of me drawing into no backups on my next hand are just too damn high.
Yeah. You'd kick yourself forever if you mulligan that and then had a dead hand.
Yeah. So I do that. I go the Tilica, I go the Lael, and I don't see Nordstallen until it's too late. The first win backup I see is King Tycoon.
Yeah.
And that is a horrible first win backup, but I have to put it down at that point, because if I don't put it down, I'm going to be pitching from hand. Anytime I want to play a win card, 2/3 of my deck is win.
Yeah. I think you bounced his Scale Toad at least, so it's not like
I bounced
just
Scale Toad, so it's yeah. So it was a 5 CP backup that was a 3 CP backup at that point.
Yeah.
So then I go to the next thing, and my next backup I have access to is Iridia. And I actually had to ask for clarification on Scale Toad works, because I have 6 cards in my hand at this point. I look at my backups. I have 3 backups. I have Iridia in hand. I can put down the Iridia, get another backup, get to 4 backups, which is kind of the magic number. I still need my Omni backup. I still need my Rainbow. But that at least gives me 4 backups. I can probably do most of my plays. It'll be a little awkward. Iridia can search a summon, which you'll see me do. I search a Mist Dragon, send it immediately to the break zone, because I don't really need it at that point. I just want to get it in the break zone so I can fetch it later. And that gets me to 5. That gets me both my discard for that and to 5 cards. I'm at the max hand size with 4 backups. I feel pretty decent. And then what ends up kind of happening is I end up with cards I don't necessarily want to play, but I've got such a big hand that I don't mind sitting on them, because both of our decks are so glacially slow. We don't, I'm waiting on him to do something. He's waiting on me to do something.
Yeah.
And I'm missing the most important card in the deck, which is Fiona. I cannot get Fiona into play unless I crack the Lael. And I gave this away for better or worse, because he Mist Dragons me at one point. The next turn, I draw double Kusith.
Hmm.
And what I'm thinking is, I really want to cast this Kusith, crack my Lael to cancel my Kusith, get a Fiona into play.
Yeah.
If I do that, I feel great. I can do anything I need to do at that point. I still have a great chance of winning the game. And I asked the judge, I'm like, okay, I have to ask this. Can I cast this with no targets in the break zone? Because the only card in my break zone was an Atomos. And he goes, no. And my opponent sees me do that and goes, oh, he wants to kill his Lael. He's locked.
Yeah.
Which is why the next turn you see him freeze my Lael. It's making sure that I can't do that. And he's like, he's funny. He laughs and says, yeah, I have Shem Hazai. I do not want to bounce your Tilica, which sounds like the best thing you could ever do.
Right.
Oh my god, I can't Tilica for 2 turns. He's like, because I didn't want you playing a different backup down to fix your backup count at all. You couldn't make it. I couldn't make Typhon a forward. I couldn't do anything. I had my other backup was even a Tyro. It wasn't even a Shantoto. So
you were really earth heavy that game, I remember.
So I should have scooped it up. As soon as I'm looking at my hand, as soon as I play the King Tycoon, honestly, I really should have said, oh. And I remember people in chat at one point, I actually get like a decent little combo off, and I play Lock.
Yeah, you had a good Lock turn.
And people go like, why didn't you kill the Scale Toad on that turn? And it was a little bit of a, hindsight is 20/20 on that. But I was going to end that turn with 1 card in hand. That Scale Toad wasn't doing anything to me there.
Right.
So my goal was, instead, I'm going to try to lock out his backups. I'm going to try to get his hand size down, because he's on a Sophie deck. Every card in that hand is expensive as hell.
Yeah.
If I can get his hand size down a little bit, he's going to have to pitch from hand a lot more to play his cards, do his things. This Lock, I'm going to replay this Lock next turn. I don't care about that Scale Toad there right now. Shantoto comes down. Now that Scale Toad is a problem again.
Yep.
And it's one of those things I didn't play around the Shantoto enough there. And
well, and I know this because I've played against you a lot, and I think I even said on stream is like, I didn't think I was trying to look into your mind, and I felt the same thing. He doesn't care about it right now, because I knew he's going to replay that Lock, because again, I've played against you. You do it all the time. And so it made sense at the time. And I still think, even if we were to go back into that moment, we didn't know what the end of the game was, I actually still think that might be the right play. However, then when things started going out of control, then, like you said, the Scale Toad became a problem, because now it's eating up your hand as well.
Yeah, so we get there. Okay, and even the Shantoto isn't that big of a deal. The real killer was the end of that next turn, or I think I go one more turn. I think I'm like, okay, I've still got I have 1 card in hand, so I drew 2 for turns. I'm on 3. I think I drew like a couple dead backups or something. Whatever, I'll pass, right?
Yeah.
Or something. Again, he had no forwards. He had no threat to me whatsoever.
Yeah.
He's just on 4 backups, scale to Biblos. No damage. Biblos doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
And then he goes to his turn, or I'm about to pass my turn. Mist Dragon, RFG, your break zone.
Yep.
So now I have no access to my break zone, which is actually quite important for my deck. And I don't have my lock. And now the Scale Toad starts to make it where I can't actually ever plus my hand.
Yep.
That was the linchpin that lost me the game. It wasn't actually the lock not breaking the Scale Toad in my
Yeah.
It was the combination of I didn't draw the correct backups and the Mist Dragon on my break zone combined with the Shantoto. Like, that was just kind of this perfect storm of events that ended up making it where I lost that game. So then, and I hope people notice this, because I know people are like, oh, you shouldn't have played so slow. That game 2, I did not want to take that game in time. I did not want to be behind time in the round. Oh, well, you didn't finish the game, you know. I'm so sorry, friend. You know, I'm just going to go to the next round, you know, even though I'm down in this game.
Yeah.
So you see me, I'm actually like, I'm shuffling quicker. I'm passing the deck back and forth. I'm really trying to play at a more than reasonable pace. I'm trying to make sure that my opponent doesn't feel slighted by me doing, slow playing at all. I did not want any questions of that. I didn't want that to be a thing. I wanted there to be no hard feelings when the game ended, regardless of how it did. If he couldn't kill me fast enough, that's on his deck for being slow. But I was not going to be because I slow played.
Yeah.
So then I lose, and then at this point, it's too late for me to really like scoop it up, try to get to a point where I can play my next game fair. Game ends, 3 minutes left in time. We still have to shuffle our decks. Still got to scoop everything up.
Yeah.
Still got to pass back and forth. The second turn of the game is turn 0 in time. And
You had such a good opening too.
And the frustrating thing about this for me, his deck has nothing that cares about it. I mean, I guess technically he has 3 Cecil, the Dark Cecil.
Yeah.
That does care about his damage. But my deck really wants to be on damage 3 to the point where I'm even on a Cactuar to self-damage.
Yeah, I said that on the stream too, is that you can't even use cards like Ochu, like Tomos. You'll never be able to attack with those.
Tomos. Yeah. All those cards are now missing half of their text. Mira is a blank 2 CP 5k.
Yeah.
Like, that's one of the best cards in my deck. It's the reason I'm playing it at the event. I can't use it all of a sudden. So what I end up doing is what I think is the only possible play is I have to kill him before he scales up because I can't scale anymore.
Yeah.
My deck no longer scales. I need to be on damage 3 for my scaling to kick in. It's not going to happen. I'm going to have to make a big play, a big push. And my hand is incredible. Like I said, I go Norstalin. I open Norstalin plus Tilica. So I go Norstalin, turn 1. Oh, and I had Tomos as well. So I go turn 2, play a Tomos, play Tilica, Tomos activate 2 backups, play Fiona, end on 1 in hand. But the crazy thing about this is I go to my next turn, activate my backups. Even if I pass this turn, which I think I do, go to my opponent's turn. Before they pass, I get to pick whatever card in my deck I want, add it to my hand, and swap it for one of the 3 cards in my hand. That's incredible. Like, that's such a good open. There's nothing that beats that, in my opinion. I win 100% of fair Final Fantasy TCG games where that happens. But it's not a fair Final Fantasy TCG game if it's first damage wins.
Yeah.
So what I end up doing is I do that. I say, okay, I got to push this next turn. I got to go in. I got to get my points of damage. And if he draws the out, he draws the out. If I get Shantoto'd, I lose the game. But I lose the game anyway if I don't make this push.
Yeah.
He had the Arcanist backup on the field. So what I realize is I have to get 3 forwards out with different costs so that if he Dull Freezes 1 and Arcanist the other, I win the game.
Yep.
And he had the Shantoto, and he didn't have it at the start of the turn. I watched it on the stream. He top decked it for turn.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yep, I made my push. I can probably stall this out a little bit. Maybe I can eventually get a lock chain going or something. Dull Freeze enough stuff to where I can swing in. But I was so far behind the 8 ball at that point for having to make the aggressive play that I lost the game.
Yeah, and I think your final turn, you just top decked like Tyro and Althea when you already had like all the backups you could handle. So
yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of a disappointing way to go out, but again, it's the lack of experience being in Top Cut. You know, I'm not used to playing a best of 3 in Final Fantasy where time is an actual concern. Like, you know, who practices this stuff, right? Like, it's not really something that's a concern.
Well, so let's talk about that time, if you don't mind, for a moment. And you know, you actually played it. You were the victim or the recipient of the loss of it. Let me talk about it from a perspective, you know, from a spectator's point of view. So one, we can't see the clock, and that's a little unfortunate. But again, you're doing the stream yourself, so I don't hold that against you or anybody.
Yeah.
I've always thought top cut time in Final Fantasy is very strange because you said they gave you 75 minutes, right?
It was either 70 or 75.
Yeah, I think 70 is the standard. In past events, you would see 70, which right there, it just feels like it doesn't even make sense. You are given 30 minutes for a single game in Swiss. So logically, you should have 90 minutes for 3 games in top. Why do you lose 20 minutes all of a sudden? And if anything, I've noticed people playing slower in Top Cut than in Swiss because it's very important. Pressure. Yeah, they really want to sit there and think about it. So that bothers me right there. It should be 90 minutes. That would have been a huge difference. If you had another 20 minutes, you finished that game 3 by the natural way it should have finished. 2, I can't believe I'm going to stick up for Storm decks here because I hate the Solitaire decks, but that is what they do. And, I know you have played. I don't think you're a slow player. I've never thought you've slow played me or anyone but these are complicated turns that have 10 casts going off and 100 reactivations.
And they're non-linear. I can't.
Yeah.
It all depends on what's in my break zone, what's in my hand. Do I have the type? Is the Atomos able to attack this turn? Can it attack safely? Because that also matters.
Yeah.
I can't just swing the Atomos and let it die because they've got a 10k on their side of the field that's just going to go, oh, yeah, I'm going to block the Atomos. If I swing the Atomos, is the Atomos going to live the swing? I've got to think all of this stuff through.
Yeah. And you said, it's oh, sorry, please continue. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah. I was going to say, and a lot of times, I have to say, okay, so I've got to also get my protection from my Atomos if that happens. What's the way I do that? If I cast a Chocobo, that's a new card that enters my, the things I can do once I draw off the Chocobo. All of this stuff has to become a factor that plays, and you've seen me before. I've cast Chocobo 3 times in a turn.
Yeah.
I've even gone before where it's Tilica, Lulu, Chocobo the Lulu, play the Lulu. Lulu get Chocobo, play Chocobo, bounce the Lulu, play Lulu, get the Chocobo, bounce the on the Lulu to draw 3 cards essentially. But every time I draw a card, I have new options and new things I can do. I have to reevaluate my turn at that point. And again, I don't think I play these slowly. I probably miss triggers because I try to play them too fast. I'll be told, I think there was probably a time where I missed. People were like, "Did he miss a Rosa 5 cast?" I might have. I don't think I did. Yeah. But I'm having to remember. Okay, that second cast, Tomos is doing these 2 here. Althea's going to activate this back up when she comes in. I'm going to, I've got to math all this out of my head. And it's a little frustrating. And again, it's not the fault of the organizers. They want to make sure their events happen and finish in a time.
Sure. Well, and they're just going by the standard rules. It's not like these are the local game stores rules. It was that's standard across the TCGs. But for me, and I say this with real life sports as well, whenever there's a rule like that, at the end of the day, I want to see the best player win. I want to see the, and so I felt really bad for you. And again, this is nothing against your opponent or anything, and that rule, I guess that's more fair than saying, well, you both get a double loss and nobody moves on. Someone has to win that and move on to the next round. But like you said, it legit turned some of the cards in your deck into paper that just, this has no text anymore because it's a damage-based card.
Yeah.
And I don't. The thing is, I don't know what the solution is either because I understand there's only so much time. With these Swiss rounds, you got to get through it. You can't let people going on. So I get all that, but it's so unsatisfying and it just feels so lame to be like, oh, okay, well, he timed it. And like you said, I think you almost 100% win that match if it's played out to its normal conclusion, especially with the way you open because your deck just has that kind of inevitability.
Yeah, and there's a lot of complicated factors on that as well. One of the things that I think frustrates me the most, I can't really practice that in a tournament setting. Because every single tournament I've ever played for the game and ever seen, you play 30-minute best of 1 in Swiss. Where am I supposed to get the practice to know? Because that's the thing, in Yu-Gi-Oh! There's a similar thing. And it's one of the things that I think is actually very frustrating sometimes in Yu-Gi-Oh! And I see it a ton in Pokemon when I watch Pokemon regional streams. Where there are plenty of times where someone will play a slower deck, they'll win game 1, but because their deck is so much slower, they go game 2, they play the first couple turns of game 2, and they know there's a chance they could still win that game. They could maybe even win it 30% of the time, but they have to scoop because they need time to play game 3 if a game 3 comes up. And that's a very real skill in Yu-Gi-Oh! Especially. Good players in Yu-Gi-Oh! Will say, they'll play it to time. They'll know, okay, my time my deck has this win condition in time. If time comes up, I need to make sure that I'm ready for it, right? And some decks have ways of... Yu-Gi-Oh's time rules aren't perfect. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
If people that don't know Yu-Gi-Oh is end of current phase, more life points wins.
Oh, okay.
Problem with that is there are cards in Yu-Gi-Oh that gain you life points.
Yeah.
So there's a really good meta deck for a long time called Sky Striker, and it's a card that says if you activate a spell card, gain 100 life points. So Sky Striker has a huge advantage in time, which it kind of needs to be fair because it's a slower deck. So it makes it where it's a little bit better. But like when you're playing these slower decks, your opponent's not going to scoop because they don't feel out of the game ever, right? Sure. My opponent's on this, Ice Wind, Ice Earth deck. They feel they scale really well too. And I agree, their deck probably against a lot of decks, if they get to 5 backups with Biblo, Scaletoad, they're going to win almost every one of those games, right? Like, they didn't have the Scaletoad in game 1, but like they feel like they had a chance to win that game, and they probably do. So I have to go through the formality of doing the points of damage. They're never going to scoop it. And again, we don't have the practice to really know. I need to scoop if I don't think I can win this game because I need time to win 2 and 3.
Yeah.
So like that's the only thing that really drives me nuts. I wish that like it just needs to be consistent. If the whole tournament is that, I can prepare for it, right? I can say, okay, maybe I'm a little more careful with my damage-based effects, or I know that even in a game I've got a decent chance at winning, I need to scoop it up early so I have time to play game 3 where I'll have, if I know I'm 60-40 favored in the matchup, which I feel like I probably was in that game, I feel like I scale faster, and when I scale, I get to ignore a lot of what that deck was trying to do.
Yeah.
I have outs to Scaletoad in my deck between Locke and Prish especially that just kind of eat that deck alive. The Shemhazais are amazing for me for removing that, bouncing backups back to his hand. Like, it felt really clear to me that I probably win that matchup. And again, that's no disrespect to my opponent. Shine is incredible. One of the nicest people I've ever played against. I mean, he shook my hand. Afterwards we're getting our thing. He's like, yeah, it was great playing against you. When I left the store, I said bye to all my friends from Dallas, and Shine, as I left, said, oh, bye, Daniel. I'm like, oh, wow, that you don't have to do that when you don't know somebody.
Well, and you've heard me say this a lot. I'm very much, my attitude is hate the game, not the player. I don't fault the players for this. I hate the game. And a thing that really does bother me about the whole time aspect, and perhaps this is just my way of thinking it, but if the idea is we only have so much time for this store to be open, to get these matches out, yada, 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 why not just make it an instant time is up, game's over, whoever has the most damage did it? But no, even in Swiss rounds, you'll go to time in the round. Well, what does that mean? That means each player still gets 2 turns apiece to do something. And I am not joking when I say I have seen more matches than I can count on my 2 hands where time in the round is longer than the match itself. Because suddenly, even though we're on time, there's no time limit to that, and so these people will just take these massive... and again, I don't blame them. I get they're trying to win. They're trying to avoid a double loss, but it's like, so if time is really the issue, why do we then just allow this unlimited free time of just go as long as you want? Like, that does really bug me.
Yeah, time is kind of just complicated in card games in general. There's not a perfect solution. Like you said, the game can go on forever afterwards. That's why Yu-Gi-Oh used to do the same thing. It was 0, 1, 2, 3 back in like the days of like GOAT format and stuff. They can't do that anymore because most Yu-Gi-Oh games are, only 4 turns.
Yeah.
Might as well they play the whole game out, which is why it's end of current phase. They have to end the game at some point. That's not perfect either. Like I said, I mentioned plenty of times where it's like, 1 burn card wins you the game right on the spot right there. Hilariously, if I had a copy of like Omega in my deck, I'd probably win that game.
Right.
Like, same situation, right? I'm never going to run Omega for the off chance I'm in top cut of an event and need a burn card. But like, it is what it is. Logistics have to be made and concessions have to be made to logistics. I wish there was a better way of doing it. I wish you could just play best of 30 or best of 31, I suppose. You need an odd number, and that way the best player always moves on, and the best deck always does it, and the person that plays it better. But realistically, people get tired, and people need to go home, and people want to go see their kids and their dogs and their family, and it is what it is. So, well,
speaking of imperfect solutions, I'm just going to throw my hat in the ring for here's 2 things I would love to see changed. First one is, I think, no-brainer. I think Top Cut should be 90 minutes. Mathematically, that just makes sense. If it's 30 minutes for a game below, why do you lose 20 minutes when suddenly you're expected to play best of 3? So that one, to me, is a no-brainer. This one, I understand it's not imperfect, but I think it's better than the current solution. Currently, if you go to your 2 turns in time or whatever, and a winner isn't decided, it goes to a double loss naturally. Now, usually what happens is one player will like concede to the other one at that point, but I would rather it just go based off damage. Like, again, imperfect, of course not, but at least that's something that was decided kind of within the game. Like, as much as it sucked to see you lose that way, I actually don't mind the sudden death rule in the sense that at least that's something concrete. It's not just like, well, flip a coin and then we'll see who wins that way. It's like, you at least have some effect on that. So
no, I totally agree. I actually think that should be standard anyway. And again, sorry if your deck is a little slower and needs time. That's just, there are advantages to playing different decks.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I mentioned with my friend Nick is I thought he was going to do really well at the event because his deck is very easy to play.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're playing a longer event, that is an advantage because when you're playing 6-7 rounds of Swiss, and these games are very cutthroat, they're very, every single interaction matters in a very important way when your plays are so much simpler and it's like, okay, what's the best aggressive forward I can put down to lock my opponent out, or do I need to curve out backups here? Like, the decision tree is a lot smaller than it is, and okay, I've got to think for these next 10 casts, what the right thing is going to be and what gets me to the point where I win the game. When you're just naturally winning the game by existing, it's a lot easier to really map your turns out. Time is technically another one of those factors that people should take into account when they build their decks. Like, I need to make sure I can pilot this fast enough. For example, if you had to actually execute the loop in a loop deck every time, people probably wouldn't actually play it because, same basic concept. That doesn't quite work because it's the same turn, but like you get the idea, right? Yeah. I would agree. I think the double loss, if there's no true winner, that's a little sucky. I'd rather they either implement a tie, and what Yu-Gi-Oh does is a win is worth 3 points and tie is worth 1 for each player. If you lose, you get no points. I'd rather see that, but I also think that, like, if you have more damage, you kind of, by the rules of the game, have won the game.
Yeah.
Even, like, if they want to do something really stupid to avoid the situation that happened with my deck, just make it at the start of each of your turns, you take a point of damage. Like, just, I don't even know if you give them the EX burst off. Just say, you don't get the EX burst, top card of your deck goes into damage face down.
Yeah.
And then say, play it out until someone dies based on that.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. I like that.
Maybe that's fair. I don't know what the correct solution actually is, but those are ways of forcing the game to end in a way that doesn't kind of disadvantage someone that's stuck in kind of a terrible situation because neither player wants to scoop.
Right.
Is what it boils down to. No one wants to lose. So.
Nailed it. So, speaking of this particular ReRaise event at the local game store, tell me some of the things you liked, maybe some of the things you thought could be improved on. I certainly have some thoughts as a caster, but you were there physically. You were running around probably like a chicken with your head cut off. You're so busy.
Yeah. So as far as things in the event itself, I thought, so first of all, LGS is my local game store.
Mm-hmm.
It's the store that I go to play. If I want to play Yu-Gi-Oh on Saturdays, I'll go there. If I want to play Final Fantasy on Saturdays, I go there. I'm very familiar with the store. I know the people that work there. I've like at least talked to some of the the owners and stuff. They're fantastic. I love working with them. Pagan especially, they're incredible. They're super helpful. Anything I needed, they were super accommodating. I brought with me a 100-foot Ethernet cable, and I ran it along the wall to their office, so I had wired Ethernet for the event.
Yeah.
Did not hear a complaint or a single word from staff about that, which, like, that's kind of an inconvenience at the end of the day. Like, huge props. I love the store. Don't have a single bad thing to say about it. The event, it's a little bit strange. I really wish, like, again, and this is probably true of most tournaments, I wish we could do best of 3 most of the time. If Top Cut is best of 3, let me get experience for what I'm going to do in Top Cut in the main rounds. I have a strategic gamer, aka Jonathan. He was the Sky Pirates player that made Top Cut. He was also on stream in the second game. Apparently all my friends lose when they're on stream in Top Cut, as it turns out. But he mentioned he got to the event and he's like, I had a great time. I got to meet a lot of people. I didn't feel like I played a lot of Final Fantasy while I was here. And like that kind of sucks when you drive. He drove from Oklahoma to play Final Fantasy, and he feels like I played 6 games. I played more than he's like I played more the day before when we all just kind of met up and goofed around for a while, just busting out random decks and playing.
Yeah.
I don't understand why there's so little Final Fantasy played at a Final Fantasy TCG event.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that the event doesn't have to end at 5, and I know that people want to go get a big dinner, but you can do dinner at 7.
Yeah.
You know, places will stay open late, for you. Like, you can do that, and I kind of agree on that. I wish that we could have had a top 16. I don't see why. I know they're like, oh, well, it's standard for a tournament of this many or an event with this many players to have this large a top cut. Bullshit. It's the largest TCG event, a TCG event we've had in Texas since the pandemic. Let us have 16 players in top cut. Like, I don't care if it's not standard and we need 65 players to do it by the traditional rules. Screw that. Put more people in top cut so more people get a chance to play and win prizing. I might have even lost in top cut. I don't care. Like, it feels really bad to have that many people bubble out because of, only playing 6 rounds and getting cut the top 8. We had prizing for top 16 even.
Yeah, that's I think what we were all expecting. So when it was like, oh, there's only top 8, that was very surprising.
So, like, those would be the changes I would make if I had access to them. And again, there's logistical issues behind some of those and everything else. But, at the end of the day, I had a great time. I'd do it again. I'm considering traveling up to the one in Omaha and getting the run back and maybe walking with an event this time. We'll see.
Yeah.
My deck list is kind of public knowledge at this point, so people might see me and go, "Ooh, that's that Daniel guy. Okay, let's lock that Nordstalin down on turn 1." And,
right.
Mulligan for a Laswell. But.
So, as possibly the only person who actually cares about the casting side of this or the spectator side, maybe I'm wrong, maybe other people do, or maybe John Schreiner really does because he does a lot of this stuff too. Some things from my point of view, I never got to be part of like the Square Enix official streams where they would do the Crystal Cups, Worlds, and Nationals, but they had kind of a dedicated team there working on those. The display looked really good, and you could tell the casters were given up-to-date information. They got to do player interviews afterwards, at Worlds. Oh, here comes Alex Hancock. Let's talk to him after his victory. And I definitely feel that's missing from a lot of this. And I say this again, I say this both to praise you and to kind of deride the store that no one would have even seen this if it weren't for you bringing your homemade equipment, setting it up in the corner of the store. Like, yes, it's very nice of them that they let you do that, but the store should be doing that, and James did do that for the Haven, so I was really happy to see that, and it worries me about these next ones coming up. Are other places going to do it? Is it just going to have to be some guy comes in with his cell phone camera to, like, hold over a match? So that part was frustrating.
I mean, you see the webcam view that you have of me right now? Yeah. That's the exact webcam that I duct taped to the top of a tripod so I'd have a stable base for the video. It wasn't really fancy equipment or anything, and I apologize for the glare on stream, and I wasn't able, I don't have the budget or the time or anything to make like a really fancy, expensive stream layout, so it's as bare bones as it gets. It was a bar. I had 2 text files that I would edit with the player names, and I would click save and it would update them for the stream, and it was bare bones and basic, and it doesn't look professional, but it's not.
Well, you were fine. You have no apology to give because you didn't do anything wrong. So if I want to see the store spot, I just want to see it in a more official capacity. 2, it was so weird that we had to watch Patty P or Patrick play 3 games in a row because apparently like people just didn't want to play on stream, and I didn't realize he was like undefeated at that point, and that's why we kept seeing him over and over again because he was number 1. And I get it. Go ahead, please.
I'll explain that one a little bit. That was partly my fault. I should have been a little bit either more forceful with that, or I should have had the idea that I had later, which was the stream setup was right next to table 7. I should have just picked up the table 7 post-it note, walked over a couple things, and just put it down on my stream setup, and just said, because like table 7 is a great table to watch. You're going to get enough variety in deck lists and players on there, because if you win, you're not staying at table 7 anymore. You're going to move up again. If you lose, you're not at table 7, you're dropping down.
Yeah.
So saying table 1 is the stream table is probably just objectively incorrect. And I should have realized that. Again, I've never streamed a TCG event. The only thing I've done for event stuff is I've streamed a couple of fighting game tournaments in the past at EVO, which similarly, I'm also trying to do things. I was so terrified. There's a thing people call the streamer debuff, which is when you're busy focusing on a stream and doing other things, you play worse. I was so worried I was going to get the streamer debuff and I was going to miss Top Cut because I was so busy. I would go poll people, tell them you're on stream, go up there now.
Yeah.
And then I would say, I'd have to go in, type in their name, run to my table, tell my opponent, give me just a second. I got one last thing to do on the stream setup before I can come back and play. Do that. Also, my deck is slow, so I'm worried about time as well. Like I'm starting my matches maybe, potentially a minute late if I, do that. That minute matters. Get the stream set up, run back to my table, sit down, start playing my games.
And that's my exact point. You're a player. You shouldn't have had to worry about any of that. But you did. And again, I'm grateful, and I'm sure anyone who watched it was grateful, because without you, we don't see it. But it shouldn't be that way.
It's kind of why I wanted to pick what I wanted to do, and it didn't end up happening. Again, maybe the judge. The judge was a good friend of mine, but maybe he just didn't want to pick the players on stream himself or anything like that. And I didn't want to actually pick players because I figured that I'd have biases on that would be unfair to other players that either wanted or didn't want to be on stream. Forcing people to play on stream was never something I wanted to do. Other thing about that is that if I really had a say in who goes on stream, I'm going based on deck lists. I don't want to have all the soiree. If somebody's got a really cool deck, put it on stream so people can see it and have fun with it. Well, if I do that, I have unfair knowledge because I'm seeing people's deck lists. So I wanted it to be as out of my hands as possible on who went on stream, because I didn't want there to be a question why a player was choosing specific people to be on stream.
Right.
And if there was if there was an objective reason to put someone on stream, which was in this case, the people were just asking and said, okay, we'll put table 1 on stream, then we put table 1 on stream. Again, mistake on my part. You live and learn. If I do it again, probably table 7 is about the sweet spot, is what I'll do for future events, if there ever is another event. But that's what happened with that. So, well,
let's hope that at the future events and the next events that we actually get to see the grand finals, because this part was incredibly disappointing that in our final match, what everyone had been waiting for, there was only one round played. And again, take from the perspective of I'm not there at the store, I'm just a caster, and I've got 64 people on Twitch watching this. So we can't hear anything, so I don't know what's going on. All of a sudden, I see mats getting scooped up, and the players getting up and leaving, and I'm like, what's going on? Like, what, is this best of 3? Why that was only game 1? And I guess apparently, and maybe you can fill this in a little bit, Brian just, I guess, conceded to Matt, or what happened there?
Well, so those two are apparently testing partners. They play each other all the time, like, that's why they're both so good at the game, is they're constantly playing each other. And I at some point, I guess they said, hey, we're just gonna, if we both get to finals, we play 1 and we're done. And that's what they did. And I have mixed feelings on that. Like, again, is it any different than if they unofficially did that and he just said, didn't play the games out seriously, or messed around? And like, you could see they were having fun while they were playing on stream, which is great. That's really healthy for the game. I think you laughed about, like, when, for instance, there was a Susanoo or something, and Okimoto just goes no with that one, when he ripped it out with an Irwin. But like, so I think seeing friendships like that is very healthy for a card game. And there's also the perspective. I'm a competitor. Like, I play fighting games. I've done speedrunning before. I've done a lot of things. And in general, the mindset for that type of stuff is put up or shut up. If I wanted that to not happen, I should have been there in finals to prevent it, right? So from those perspectives, what they did is totally fine. It's within their rights on that end. I don't think there was collusion. They technically played a game. Like, they didn't just say, you win. They didn't split the pot or anything like that. There wasn't a pot to split or anything like that. Like, it kind of is what it is there. It sucks for the stream. I don't think it's necessarily a healthy look for the game if you want to have, like, these really showcases of high level play for people to, like, get into the game by watching and see, like, oh, that's why I want to play this game. Like, I don't think it's great for that. But to me, from a competitor standpoint, as someone that was there, someone that literally even was there running the stream, like, I don't necessarily have a problem with what they did. I would have liked to have seen the games get played out. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna tell people that I was, super excited to see that happen, but I don't have a leg to stand on in that race, in my opinion.
You are a lot kinder than I'm going to be, so I applaud you for that. So here's the caveat I'll give up front. I understand that from a rules perspective, you are allowed to concede a game at any time. I get that. It can be the same in Swiss, and I've seen people, even in my groups, where they'll play the entire game out, player A will wipe the floor with player B, and then player A just concedes to player B. Yeah, go ahead, you won it, even though they clearly didn't. And again, that's in the rules. You can concede at any time. So no one did anything illegal. No one did anything that isn't in the rules. And this is one of those ones I don't have a solution for it, because how do you force them to play it out? Well, are you going to make Brian sit there? No, sir, I'm going to sit there and like hold your cards and make you, he can just say, okay, well here, I'll play badly, take 7 damage, and I lose. And I don't agree with that. I don't think you should be forced in the sense that someone should physically do that to you with your cards. Yeah, if you want to quit or concede or whatever you want to call it, you can do that. And I get that. And I don't know what the solution is, because also, though, it really was stupid and it sucked that we're here to see the grand finals. Imagine if this game ever got big and this was think of Overwatch or all these esports. Well, if this was in a stadium and it's the grand finals and they go, game 1, oh, can he come back? Well, we don't know, because everyone just quit and went away. It was very deflating. And again, not being able to hear it, not being able to da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I get it. I get no one technically didn't do anything wrong. And I don't know what the solution is, because I understand, well, you can't force people to play. They're allowed to quit anytime they want. So I don't know what the answer is, but I'm just going to at least vent and say, man, that was a very deflating and frustrating ending to see.
I agree. I think it's a community mindset thing. And hopefully if, people hear about why that wasn't really something that's healthy for the game long term, they won't do it, because I think we all love the game. I wouldn't be here talking with you if I didn't truly enjoy playing Final Fantasy TCG. And I want other people to have, exciting things about the game that get them into it, to see this really fantastic card game the way I see it. And, sometimes it's a really hype grand finals that just gets someone over the top and say, you know what? I'm going to pick up that Guardian starter deck and I'm going to go to my first locals, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's very healthy for the game when there are good matches that people have video of. Big shout outs to the YYT for putting up some really great matches on their YouTube the last couple of days. I've had a lot of fun watching those, and I think stuff like that is what helps get people to realize that these card games are worth putting time and money into. So
well, sir, I think we've just gone in and out about ReRaise pretty much everything I can think of there. So